Nos encontramos en la era digital. Por eso le ofrecemos servicios y soluciones de tecnología para que transforme digitalmente su negocio. Grupo Babel, la empresa líder en transformación digital.
Good morning, everyone. I want to start this presentation. Thank you, everybody, for joining us in the Innovation Week. It's a virtual event of full week of virtual conference of the vision of great technology manufacturers of 2021 and beyond. This is in order for the organization to know how they are doing right now and how they need to focus all their efforts. I would like to tell you the Grupo Babel is a company specialized in the implementation of digital transformation service and solutions with 19 years experience in Latin America and the Caribbean. And since the beginning, Grupo Babel has been the forefront of disruptive technologies to seek to change the world in which we will live, and at the same time strives to be a strategic of all the organizations and the process of change. We are also would like to thank you all our sponsors who are Grupo Babel, S4D, Microsoft, Oracle, Huawei, Incomex, Scale Agile, Appgate, Solent, ULEAD, Babel Learning, PK, R3, Agile Action, and Aranda Software. I want to welcome everyone to this conference. My name is Natalia Elizondo, and I'm the specialist in agility in Grupo Babel. I'm super excited to present to all of you our next speaker. He has been involved in software development over 50 years, and he has been active participating in the creation and delivery of Agile software since 1987. He participated in the creation of the very first Scrum team, and actually it is a social honor for me to introduce to you Jeff McKenna. Good morning, Jeff. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing just fine. Thanks very much, Natalia, and hi to everybody out there.
Jeff, for us, it's a really honor to be able to be with you here and to talk. And I'm pretty sure everybody in the audience is very excited as well to hear your experience and all this that you have to share with us today. So first of all, we would like to start with you telling us about a little bit about your career path. How did you start on all the Agile software world since the beginning? How was your career path?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the history and all that. So I started in 1962. So that's quite a while ago, and I started as a tester is what I started with, and it was a very small group, and it was very interactive. We talked and interacted all the time. A small group of about 8 people. And then it grew, and it kept going, and it kept happening, and happened. And I worked my way up through started on mainframes, and then moved up through minis, and then microprocessors over the years. And I've ended up doing a bit of everything. I've been at marketing. I've had my own company. I've done testing, development, architecture work. Of course, living as long as I have, you do a lot, and so. And so when with the first Scrum team started, when I had already been doing business software for about 30 years, so I brought a lot of experience to the table on that project.
I'm sure that you have a lot of experience, and thank you for sharing us those details, because I mean it is obviously, it's good to understand that you have like a lot of experience. What we were saying at the beginning, more than 50 years on the software development.
Right.
Based on all your experience, I'm pretty sure it was like a great moment for you at that. But we would like to know, where was your vision focuses to purpose a social revolutionary change for the software development? What you were thinking, what you guys were thinking at that moment, like how you focus, what you were thinking at in that moment?
Well, I don't think about it like that. It wasn't as though we got together and said, oh, we're going to make a big change. It wasn't like that. So the very first Scrum team was spearheaded by Jeff Sutherland, one of the authors of the Scrum Guide, of course. And that was in 92, 93. I was there as a coach on that team. And John Skumatalis, who was really the first Scrum Master, was there. And all of us had been doing work for a long time. I had been doing work for 30 years at that point. And we all brought what we knew worked. we all just came with things that were, so none of us were traditionalists. So we all brought a kind of sense of how we can work. And Jeff Sullivan helped provide some structure in terms of the Scrum. And it wasn't as laid out as it is now. Scrum has evolved since that first team. And so it really was very, very much a, let's get together and see what works. And we try things. And that attitude of experimentation, of course, is a key part of Scrum. Let's try it, see if it works. It may not work. It's okay. It's you won't know if you don't try. And so that attitude was way back in the beginning. And of course, I brought that from my first job. My first job, we didn't know how to do anything. There was no waterfall. There was no operating system. There was just raw hardware. It was all assembly language. It really, we didn't know how to do anything when I started. And that attitude moved into Scrum to say, look, how do we experiment? And then lots of experiments have been done over the years by many people. And so we have some ideas about things that work better than others. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for sharing that with us. And of course, like you say, you have a lot of experience. It is very funny for me that you say that since the beginning, you didn't know how to do anything, like all the same software development language and everything. So, I mean, it is amazing all your career path and your journey to get us here. And I'm pretty sure like everybody would like to know, because I mean, you were part and you participated on the experience of the first running a Scrum team. How was that experience? What do you guys learn? And I'm pretty sure you learn a lot. Like you say, Scrum have a lot of revolution since you guys started to now. But how was the first sprint? Can you tell us about that historic moment that was the first Scrum team?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because we've looked back on it a little bit, and I mentioned that we brought stuff that we knew worked. And then there was a particular set of interpersonal dynamics that helped. There was John, myself, he was a team person, they were about team. Jeff had the higher level view of what stuff. I helped with the technology and what we were doing there. And we had people that were working hard. At the time, we had a young person, Joe Kinsella, who was just a student. And he was an intern there in that project. And he's since now a VP of engineering at some, I don't remember what company now, but in Boston. And about 10 years ago, he did a blog that talked about some of the things he thought were important. And I think he did a really good job talking about what was going on in that first Scrum team. And we put together some slides for that. So let's go ahead and let's talk about each one of those. So, yeah, so this is Joe, Joe Kinsella. And so we're going to talk about these 8 things that he had described as important in the history of Scrum. So let's go ahead. Next slide, please. Okay. So, and some of this stuff, if you studied Scrum or Agile, cross-functional teams. We don't build teams that only have very specialized work. We have different people bringing different points of view and different experiences and different expertise to the team. And we sometimes forget that when people worry about productivity and getting more done, we get more done by not working longer, but by taking advantage of the synchronicity between people with different experience, rather like a sports team. A soccer team, not every soccer player plays the same way, plays the same role. We have different people with different roles, and the whole group, the whole team brings the power to what happens. Let's go to this next slide. So Joe really mentioned about communication and how important that was. So we all sat together. We're co-located, and most of us understand how important that can be. Even something as simple as even when we're online during the pandemic, that if we have people on the screen, if we see them, we do better than if we just see their name. That all of this is about human-to-human communication. And it requires some trust, some honesty, and it requires taking time to do it. So we talked a lot in that very first team. Again, it was a new problem. We didn't know a lot about it. And so we talked a lot. What's the technology do? What's the domain problem? How do we do that? And so Joe just really noticed how much we talked. Go ahead. And then this one was an interesting point. He said we showed off in that very first Scrum team all the time. Now remember, or I didn't say, let me say again now, Scrum on this first team didn't look like it looks now. We didn't, a lot of it has been formalized or stylized so this was ad hoc. We would just show stuff at the end of the week, once a week, we would show off what we were doing to anybody that cared. But more than that, we showed our work to each other during the day as we went along. What about this? What do you think about this? Is this a good idea? Oh, I'm trying this over here. What do you think? That kind of interaction between each other to come up with what does the team feel is what really works. As well, and bringing in the customers were there. We couldn't have them there every day, but once a week, though, we had people coming in representing those customers. Go ahead. And we hired people who learn. We hired people on that project who learn, to recognize that nobody knows everything, and there's always more to learn. Here I am. I'll be a little bit strange here, but I'm 75 years old, and I'm still learning. I got to learn today. Today I've discovered that StreamYard doesn't work on my browser. So I learned that today. So there's always learning going on. And so we build that in and we make time for it. Joe talked about how that we would bring in books and once in a while I could find an expert, come in and talk to the team. And so we could learn. Go ahead. Code consolidation. This is actually one of the areas that I was very involved with a lot because we want to keep the code, the output of what we're doing, we want to keep it always of high quality. And as a person who's been in the business a long time, I sometimes am a little sad that we don't pay enough attention to the quality of what we do. We don't use good patterns to write things. We don't investigate what we've done and go back and make it better, to make it easier to maintain and have less bugs and more. Old developers often talk about code smells. Bad code has a smell to it, and you want to have code that smells good. And maybe if you're not doing software, but you're doing something else, are you using best practices or the best that you know? Are you doing experimentation to find better ways of doing things? And do you write down what you're doing so you understand your process about what you're doing? Let's try the next one. Next slide. So another one is that we expected on that team, senior people, I was senior on that team, of course, to spend quite a bit of time helping other people, teaching them, helping them, mentoring them, helping them learning. The art of, this was software, so every domain is a little different. But in software, the art of knowing how to do things is not something you can just get by reading a book. And these days, people don't even want to read books. They just want to go do it. And sometimes we need to take more time looking at what we're doing. Scrum has this interesting flavor of talking about our process. And our process should include teaching each other. I consider when very good Scrum teams get going, sure, they do good product and they're reliable, their work gets managed well, they're reliable, but good teams also have a component of learning and they improve how they learn. So maybe you can think about that as well. Next slide. Social bonds. This is harder these days with the pandemic, but we used to go out to dinner at least once a week, all together. When I go out with companies now, we say, can we all go out as a team for lunch, at least maybe once or a week or every 2 weeks? Can we get together and do that? Today on social media and all that, so we're using that on online systems now where people get together, not to talk about work, but to talk about us as people. We are all people, and we spend more of our time at work than almost anything else we do, and yet we don't think about the social side of that sometimes. So that was important for that first Scrum team. Next slide. I think that's it, actually. Yeah. Okay, there we go. Thanks a lot. So does that help a little bit with that first team to understand what was going on there a bit?
Of course, Jeff. And like, it is amazing to hear. I mean, you went through a lot of critical events and how you guys drive the success for that very first project and team, and that's what you walked through us. But for me, really come to my mind, and I'm pretty sure with all your experience and everything, how we need to focus on people, how we need to focus on coach and developing people, letting them the opportunity to learn, and actually based on quality, we can like develop the right tool for our clients, our customers. Like the experience that you learn on that very first team actually is something that we need to apply still on all the Scrum teams at this time. And I mean, it is very important to focus on people and coach them and develop them.
Yeah, and we mentioned a few of those, but where we need to recognize, and that to me is the critical role of the Scrum leader, the Scrum master, is that role is to help with the team dynamics. And so the team dynamics have a technical component. How do we do work? What tools are we using? What knowledge do we need? All of that. But there's a social component as well. How well are we communicating? Do I have a couple people on the team who are not getting along? What do we do about that? How do we help get that better? How do we build a team where there's trust inside the team, between the team members? That takes time. That takes attention. And then if that works, if we get that happening, then we run to the next level of that, which is where our customers start to trust us. And so rather than trying to make a detailed explanation of every little thing they want us to do, they get to give us higher level view of what they want, and they trust us to build and make for them the right thing. And that requires time. If some of you that are interested in this problem, you may want to look into the Toyota and how the kind of relationships and contracts that Toyota builds with their suppliers. It is not, oh, build it just like this, and I want 100,000 of these things. That's not how they do it. And if you don't get it exactly right, I'm going to sue you. And that's not what we want to do. What we want to do, because these are complex problems we're working on. We can't figure everything out before we do it. It's impossible to do that. So I got a little carried away there on that one. But so the outline, the Scrum guide gives a pretty good feel for the boundaries around that. But it really takes people working together. So we need people that care about people on our teams, that work with each other, not merely necessarily as their primary work, but they have to care about their team members. It's not sufficient just to have a bunch of great people together if they all just want to work by themselves. That doesn't work.
Exactly, Jeff. I mean, that way will not get the result that we're looking for. I mean, you did have the experience with the first Scrum team, and I think you guys learned signs there. That we need to care about people, that we need to work thinking that we are just one team, and the importance to have the understanding that we work for the same company and will not be technology business. We need to have the same vision and work together to actually generate the value the corporation is looking for.
Yeah, great, yes.
So yeah, moving forward to a little bit, just talking about implementation and everything, and I'm pretty sure you went through all these already, but sometimes when we start running like Scrum or any framework, Agile framework in a company, we have to implement or sometimes use the same like templates or tools that they do have for keep tracking of the process or just tracking some production paths or that kind of stuff. So how often do you recommend that we need to review the tools or the templates to make sure they're still generating value for our implementation process or agile process that we're doing over there, like, because sometimes we don't know how often we need to review that, or how like, I know I have a template, it's not working. Can I remove it for the first sprint, or I need to give more time to actually work for the company? How often do you recommend that audit process?
Well, it's really interesting. When we start with an existing team that's been doing more classical kind of management and all of that, then they want to break everything down to details and then add everything up. But real innovative products which really solve new problems and all that don't come about that way very well. If you're looking for a metaphor, an idea, it's more like a garden. I still know I can have a garden. I can plan it out and know what I want. But if you've ever done any gardening, you know as soon as you start putting plants in the ground or seeds in the ground or walkways or whatever you're doing, that the plans all change as you do it. It always changes as you do it. So we need to recognize change happens. This is a fact of life.
Yeah.
Okay, this is not about Scrum. It's not about Agile. This is about living your life. You may know what you're going to be doing 2 minutes from now. Oh, I'm going to sit and listen to Jeff for another 2 minutes. But how about 2 hours from now? You may or may not know. 2 days from now, you know even less. 2 months from now, you probably couldn't tell me what you're going to be doing 2 months from now. So this isn't a problem. This is life. This is just how it is. So we need to operate acknowledging that that's how it is, that we can't predict the future. I mean, when the pandemic is the greatest example I know, I mean, all of us had our lives turned completely upside down because of the pandemic, and no one knew it was going to happen. And what have we been doing? We've been adjusting, trying things out. Some things have worked, some things have not worked. So that's the human way. That's how we do things. So to me, it's a matter of having good conversations at the right level. Now, one of the things I sometimes like to remember is that in Agile or Scrum, we're not changing the work. We're changing when we do it. Okay? So let's say we build something. Let's say we're making a car. And some of you may remember there's the final inspection. We got a car and some guy sits there. Well, let's say while the car was being made, a bolt that holds the engine on the car didn't get put on. This bolt that's supposed to hold the engine on didn't get done. Can this inspector see that? No, they can't see it because it's too late. That inspection about that bolt should have been done much earlier. Well, the same thing is true of our work. Let's figure out, we take a small bite, let's figure out what we want to do. We always know things we know we need to do. Let's start there. Let's do what we know we need to do. And as we go along, the function of a backlog and all that is to bring us to work in an order that maximizes value. That order brings us work, and then, but every time we start working on something, we know more than we did the day before. And so therefore we can do a better job. But if we just say, oh, we're just going to work for a long time with all this idea, work, and then we discover the world's changed.
Yeah.
I had an experience of this. We had a very good developer on a team years ago, before Scrum. And we did some design work and figure out what we we're going to do. And he went off and said, I'm doing this part. And he said, I'm going to go do it. And he spent 3 months working on that part. Meanwhile, we were working together and we kept saying, bring your work in. And he wouldn't bring it in. He wanted to finish it before he showed it to us. And he brought it in and none of it worked in our system because the system he was in had changed during that time.
Okay.
So that means we got to do things, and we got to get feedback from the right people to know if they're the right thing and talk about it. So recognize that, for instance, some of you are more technical may know that test-driven development says, let's figure out what we're going to do before we do it. And we've proved that with the test. So we write the test first, then we write the code, and then we improve the design by refactoring. It's completely backwards from how most people think. So.
Okay.
Right, yeah. I don't know if I'm answering your questions, but I'm doing
Yes.
it.
No, yes, you are asking me the question. I mean, we need to review how often we think we need it and actually be able to understand that we are open to change. And sometimes the change, it doesn't be like in exactly cycle, but we need to understand the business that we are running, getting the feedback on the right moment to make sure we actually take actions on the right moment to impact the better our process. Pretty much like that, right?
In Scrum, we have feedback every day.
Exactly.
Every day we have Scrum. And if you're doing software development work and you're doing test-driven development like that, we typically get feedback about at least once an hour. At least once an hour you have feedback.
Yeah. Okay, Jeff, we're going to move to the next question. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people in the audience went through this. By myself, I can have to tell you, running implementation, I'm going through this a lot. Sometimes people think that when we talk about Agile projects, we cannot give like a total cost. We have to go to the VIPs, we have to go to the sponsors, and we normally say, you know what, this sprint or the next 2 or 3 sprints, this is how much you need to pay for. How do you recommend us to approach those VIPs and say, hey, this is the cost of the project, or how we can give them something more solid and not just an approximation?
Okay, well, the solutions here depend a lot on lots of different things, but fundamentally, if you've been doing this before, and clearly you have if you're asking that question, so you've been doing it before, and Scrum doesn't say you can't do that. You could do it. However, what we find is that if you do the old style, and what is that? That work breakdown structure, you break down the work to all the things. You estimate all the pieces at the bottom and you roll it all up. And then you add a fudge factor because you know it's not right. Well, it turns out that if you start practicing taking a larger piece, and most Scrum teams use a story, a larger piece, a piece that gets some value, you can start estimating those just in terms of how much work they are with some measure. We use story points a lot because they work very well. And after a while, you'll start to know this is how fast the team gets work done and at high levels. So we do pretty good planning, meaning we can predict pretty well, usually with no more than about 1 or 2 minutes of estimation in each story, each person. Let me tell you history, tell you something else though. A little bit about history here. The issue, this part of it is, why do we know it has to do with promises? And we think of promises as being a problem of estimation. But promising is not, we're actually pretty good at estimating. If you don't do all the buffering in general, we're pretty good at estimating, but we're not good at all at predicting change, the change that happens. And that's those are the major factors. It's the change that's happening that causes us to miss our dates and all that. Okay? So there's ways to do it, but let me just, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time here, but let me tell you one more story. This was before Scrum as well, but we had a friend of ours, I didn't work on this, but a friend of mine did. It was a company doing work for the Ministry of Defense in England, a small team. And they wrote a contract, a 2-week contract. It was for 2 weeks. And so they got together at the beginning and said, okay, this is what we can do. And they did it. At the end of the 2 weeks, the customer came in and they showed him what they did. And the customer, oh, that's good. Now we'd like you to do this. And they made the contract so it was easily extended by another 2 weeks. And every 2 weeks, they did the work. The customer liked it or didn't. They said what they wanted to change. And they added another 2 weeks. This went on for 18 months. For 18 months, every 2 weeks, the team met. And finally, they went in one time, and they had the normal meeting, and here's what we did, and what do you want? And the customer said, we're not going to renew the contract. And of course, the business people went, oh my God, horrible. All the people doing the work are going, oh God, we get a break. we get to relax, right?
Yeah.
And the customer said, I don't want to pay you for time. I don't know what I want. And 2 weeks later, they came back and said, okay, we're ready to go again. And so this was it just was exactly what we're trying to do in Agile, which says, look, let's do something, see what it's like, and say, now what do we want to do?
Okay.
Now, there's things you have to do to get that to work. I'm not saying it's easy to do all that, but that's the direction we're headed in. And the contracts sometimes are a problem. The contracts force us to do things that don't add value.
Yeah.
Okay, I know I'm seeing there's lots of questions going on over there. I'm not looking at those, so I hope you
don't worry about it. We have like three questions for you, and then we are going to take some time to answer some questions from the audience. So we would like to know, like you're saying, like since the beginning, Scrum have changed and have evolution with all the process. How do you see Scrum evolution to remain being the leading framework for software development? How do you see it's going to do all the evolution process Scrum and keep being over there?
I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. However, I'm not convinced that Scrum is the right way to do some things. It's not. So Scrum is a particular way to do Agile. I think Agile is here to stay, and it's going to be showing up. But a Scrum is just one way to do that. And so the fundamentals are the same. Some people talk about the death of Scrum and all that. It's not like that. Some of you who have been around technology a long time may know that, there's still a lot of people coding in COBOL, which is one of the oldest languages in the world, right? These things don't go away. They find their niche and stay as long as it's. So I don't worry about that. Again, if you're building an organization that's learning, maybe you're going to bring together the next piece, which is going to advance us on this. Because it's not, oh, here we are, and now we're doing this, and now we're doing this over here. It's more like little steps. And then suddenly we go, it's kind of like having a child. You do them, and Priya's got a baby there now, and she's going to spend time watching the baby grow, every little step. And I guarantee all of you who have had children know, it's one day you wake up and go, oh my God, they're now fully grown. How did that happen? They're now adults. It's the same way. Yeah, it's like that.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for that one. And we have a question that I'm pretty sure, we understand the vision that you did have when you guys thinking about taking the first Scrum team and all the stuff. But do you ever think that the framework will become as far-reaching as it did?
Nope.
No,
it was just us doing work, and it worked well. And then somebody else said, that works well, let's try that. And then somebody else, and then, they presented a paper on it, and that took it a little further. People went to conferences and talked about it. Folks, that was in 92. How many years was that? This is, what is that? 20? No, it's 30 years ago, or, this has not been a journey. I mean, this is a journey. This is a journey, excuse me. This is not, oh, we went from here to there. This is like, people still, this doesn't work. We still hear that. This doesn't work.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. And this will be my last question before we move to question from the audience. But how do you explain the value that Scrum brought to the world? How you can explain that to us based on all your journey, all the process that you guys went through, the first Scrum thing and all your experience? How do you explain the value that Scrum brought to the world?
Well, as Joe said in there, that we were continually getting feedback and from the customers about what was going on. There's value there on what we produce. The customers like it. They like knowing what we're doing. There's value for the people, and quite frankly, that's my focus, especially these days. Is I watch people that work in companies that are doing Agile and Scrum enjoying their work. And at some level, that's the most important thing for me. Whether or not it's the latest thing and the latest big thing and all that is not so important to me. But I want people to have full lives. And so, for instance, I still remember on one of the first extreme programming projects, I've done more than just Scrum, of course, first extreme programming project, that we had a rule that you had to go home at 5 o'clock and you weren't allowed to work at home. There was a president here in Silicon Valley. By the way, some of you may not know, I live in Silicon Valley. And there was a president here who used to go around at 6 o'clock into the parking lot and give parking tickets to employees who were still at work. Now, a lot of that's gone away. The pandemic has said, oh, everybody can work from home. We can work all the time. That is very, very bad for human beings. And I want us to recognize that Scrum allowed us to tell the truth about what's going on so that we could manage our lives and be reasonable and not get blamed for things that are not our fault. And there's a bunch of other things that happen with Scrum. But fundamentally, I think of it as this way. Let's tell the truth about what's going on in our projects.
Wow, I mean, I was expecting an answer, like that kind of answer from you, that question, but I mean, you blow my mind with that response, like, yeah, that's because people will think the value of Scrum has been the process, like continuous process, value generation, software, and like you're saying, I mean, we care about people, we care about what they can do if we actually give them the time to rest, to learn and develop themselves. So, I mean, that answer, thank you, Jeff, really focus us a lot again.
Okay, one more on that. Just so you know, I started work in 1962, and it was first acknowledged as knowledge work, and it was brand new kind of work. I mean, there very few people knew anything about it back then, computers. And we were given 4 weeks vacation a year starting the job, 4 weeks. Okay. Because they said, you need time to recoup. This is much more difficult than you think.
Wow.
So that's the attitude we had way back then.
Back then. Okay. That's amazing. And that's the reality. We need that time, that kind of time, Okay. So, I mean, for me, it has been such an honor to be with you. And I mean, I have like 1,000 more questions for you, but we are going to move for the question for the audience. We will not be able to answer all the questions because we have a lot of questions. So thank you everyone for those questions on the chat. We are going to read the question in order that we receive it. So the first one said, what would you do focus teams that are working with different agile frameworks in organizations and not communicated each other? Like we have a company that have different agile team, but they're not working with the same framework and their communication is not good. How we can work or what we can do to focus those teams to help them?
Well, a lot of these kind of questions, companies have culture, they have practices and all that. So if the idea is we're trying a couple of different frameworks to see which ones of them work better, then what data are you collecting to answer that question? But it may be that you need different frameworks for different kinds of problems. So that's okay. But then how do we figure out a way to talk about how we're doing in a way that, so if I have two different teams that are doing, where's my camera? Two different teams that are doing things in two different ways, somewhere up here above those teams, there has to be a way for some kind of reporting or knowledge that allows people to figure out what's going on. Now, we see this problem show up a lot because companies go, okay, we want one tool for everything we're doing in the company. Why? Nothing in life requires one tool for everything we're doing. Yeah. What are we doing? But there is a level, maybe each tool has to report in a particular way that is common to all of them. And that's doable. But then recognize too, if you have a bunch of different frameworks because they're just trying them out, recognize you're just trying them out. And so then you get to decide, and maybe you pull it down to two. And then for this kind of projects, this works better for this kind of project. Like for ops work, Kanban probably works better than the Scrum. Okay. But in general, be careful there because these are generalizations and you've got to look at what's really going on before you know the truth. We've even had groups that have both Kanban and Scrum because sometimes the ops people find stuff and then they need it done by the other team. So it moves from Kanban to Scrum. We have a way to move them across because they have different ways of working. They have different ways of talking about how they're doing. And Kanban doesn't emphasize teams and Scrum emphasizes teams. So you need to know enough frameworks to say, when is this better than another?
Okay.
A little bit?
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah. I'm very sure that answer is for their needs or what they're looking for. We have our next question, and they say, what can you tell us about scale agility outside of IT departments?
Well, this is an area of experimentation that's going on. Okay, let's be clear about that. So these days, I see three frameworks, SAFe, LESS, and Scrum at Scale, as three frameworks that I think, there's others. There's always others. Okay. And so the question is, and they each work differently. They work differently, and they're better in certain areas. For people that are moving out of a typical environment, an old environment, SAFe often is a better way to do it. For people that are just wanting to redo everything, really make a huge change, then Scrum at Scale might be better. For large hardware projects that will have a lot of hardware, big projects, then LESS might be a better way to do it. These are just my opinions. And so I don't think any one is ever going to become the right way. And so again, what experiments can you do? Bring in some people, talk about it. But be careful. Don't believe the marketing hype. Just, find out what kind of problems you have. I've seen all three of these be used. Some of you, Scrum at Scale, roughly, even if you do something like that. Let's say you use one of these scaling frameworks in a big company. There's going to be different ways of doing it inside that company. Don't expect everything to be the same. It's not going to be the same. So what you want to do is you want to put the communication both up and down to be as close to the same for everybody as possible. Down to the team. In Scrum, I want the communication consistency across the company to stop at the level of Scrum. I want the Scrum teams to be able to do their work as they want to do it inside the team. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff, for that one as well. Our next question is, how can we identify if we are incorrectly implementing Agile methodologies? How we know that we're doing it wrong?
So are your people happy? Are your people feeling engaged in their work? That's the one. Another one, are your customers, are they feel like they're getting value from you, what you're doing? Those two are the ones that matter. That's why we're doing this. So that's how we know how we're doing. Okay? The people and the product. That's how we doing. So find out, or are you learning maybe? Are you getting better? Have you tried things? Or are you getting stuck? If you walk into an organization, as a coach, I do this, of course, you walk into an organization, I can usually tell within a day if they're feeling stuck or not.
Okay, that's a good one. I wasn't expecting that answer for that one, but that's great. You're right on that one. Of course, you're right on that one. Our next question, is how do you go about implementing agility in a system development team that serves 16 applications and have 16 people, each of whom develops and support application individually?
Okay, great. I actually am working with a customer right now who has exactly this problem. So, so the first thing to recognize is that this is a business risk problem. This is a risk to the business. I assume those 16 applications are all very important. They're running, they're doing things. And if one of those 16 people decides to go get a better job, whatever, a different job, or they decide to retire, or they decide he wants to be a full-time father, or whatever it is, then that person's gone, and now there's tremendous risk for the company because one of those 16 applications no longer can be supported. So first we have to understand that's a risk, and it may be a big risk. And so the company needs to acknowledge that, because then they can solve it. If they don't acknowledge it's a problem, then you can't solve it. Okay. So then what we do is we say, okay, let's start some cross-training. So then we wouldn't do this with everything right away, but we would start saying, okay, we're gonna, and let's say I would take the senior people and the most critical applications and use that to help decide which ones we want to do. So that person, let's say this good person is working on this critical application, he should be pairing up with someone else on the team while they're doing the work and helping them understand it. Now, so it's one of the first things that happened. That was in the original paper, which helped do Scrum, talked about cross-functional teams. We talked about that earlier today. Cross-functional teams is not what you have there. We call that a work group. It's a bunch of people working. That's not a cross-functional team. So then, what do we do? Well, knowledge is one of the ways we do it. So I've been in projects where all development had to be done by a pair. That meant at least 2 people were involved with all code that was written. And that meant the entire team knew the code well. Now, I understand you're in a support organization. They don't have time to do that. Then we look at that, see if we can help. Even if that person can only transmit 15% or 25% of what they know, enabled that person, you still will be more resilient, and it's in the right direction. I'm not suggesting that all 16 people should be able to work on all 16 applications, but maybe each person on that, each 16 people can work on 2 or maybe 3 applications. That would be good enough to reduce the business risk a lot.
Okay, thank you for that one as well, Jeff. I'm pretty sure that is not the only scenario for the one who wants for, because it's a reality for a lot of corporations, you know.
Yep.
Okay, we have 2 questions that are actually pretty much the same. They would like to know what is the magic on Scrum, because they're asking about the Scrum evolution and how Scrum is adapting during all this year, and where is the magic of Scrum?
It's the people.
Yeah.
These are people that want to learn, that want to get better. In my history, my trajectory, I want to call it that way, but some of you may not know, I never wanted to be a manager, so I've never been a manager. I've been a lead, of course, and all that, but I've never been a manager. I didn't want to do that. And if I look back at my life, I had a major change either in technology or something at least every 7 years. In other words, I learned something new, very new. I learned a new language. Now, when I say I learned a new language, I don't mean I learned the syntax of a new language. That I mean I spent 4 or 5 years in that language becoming very good at it. Okay. So that's part of it. And Scrum has that built in. And it works. I mean, it's adopted very well because it means learn what's going on. What's the truth? Go back and read the Scrum Guide again. It says, we're not going to tell you how to do things. Try it and figure out what works for you. If you study less, really emphasizes this. That scaling framework says the first big less book contained hundreds of experiments they did. And everyone says, well, this is what you did and this is what happened, but you need to do it yourself to see what's true for you. And the same thing is true about everything we do. Maybe our daily Scrum isn't working. Why not? Well, 2 of the people, their kids are getting older and you got to go to school and I got to take them to school and I can't make it to the meeting on time without rushing. Great, let's move the meeting. I mean, that sounds like a very simple thing, but it still captures the idea. we need to look at what's going on, tell each other the truth about what's going on as best we know. And if you need to make a change or try a change, try something different. See what happens. And Scrum's good at that. Really good at that.
Yeah.
That's why the retrospective meeting in Scrum is the most important meeting in Scrum.
Yeah, I mean, you are right on that one. Sometimes it's very hard for people to understand the importance of the retrospective meeting and being on projects that is the last one that they want to implement,
Yeah, right.
Thank you, Jeff. And I think the next question actually go for the same path, but because they're asking what is the best advice that you can give us to implement correct Scrum in the IT department and the rest of the organization?
Adopting Scrum in an organization is a journey. It's never over. Okay?
That's
It's
true.
never over. It's a change. It's a change about how we interact with people. It's a change how people think about work. It's a change about how we interact with our customers and all that. So in general, it's very difficult to answer this question because it depends a lot on what's going on now, blah, 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 all that, right? But in general, don't try to change it all at once. Start small. Get some experience going. Bring in a couple of experts, some coaches that can help you get going. So you can start to get, and make sure the expectation is that you're not going to change everything right away. It's not going to get better right away. Often in good Agile implementations that I've been involved with, the quote productivity of the team actually goes down for a while. And if you're measuring the productivity 2 weeks later and go, look, it's going down, we better stop, and you're never going to get there. Because it is a change. And not everyone was going to want to do it. So make sure that the people that are involved with the change really believe and want to do it. And if they don't want it, if they think it's a bunch of, I won't use the word, but if a bunch of bad stuff, then they shouldn't be on the project. You can't get change to happen with people that don't really want to change.
Okay.
And it doesn't mean they're bad people or anything like that. We all have different levels of acceptance of change in our lives. And some people don't like change very much. And so maybe they need to wait until some of the difficulties of learning and doing something new kind of get settled down more before they start to get involved. So sometimes we use the word champion for that. Get some good champions involved.
Great, thank you, good, Jeff, for that one as well. Our next question, they say they want to know, adopting Scrum can decrease the normal trend of increasing IT budget.
I got it.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the idea is you should be able to do that, but then I would be, if that's a goal, if that's one of the things, the goal is to decrease the budget. Some people don't recognize that the best way to get more work done in the same amount of time, which is the same thing, is to spend less time not doing work. So for that, I would look at value stream analysis and look at a non-value adding activity. Are you having a meeting every day that people are rolling their eyes and not really there, or they're on their computers doing something else? Why are we having that meeting? These little things are what's going to affect the budget more. How do we not do something that isn't really needed? It starts all the way at the top. If we're working on 10 projects at one time, it's highly likely you're not very efficient. Why don't we work on 3 projects at one time and focus and have less task switching? That will be. Notice all these things I'm mentioning are not the big things. They're the little things that add up.
Love it. And we're moving to our last question for the audience. And I think this one, it's very good to be the last one. What is the funniest thing that happens to you implementing Scrum?
The funniest thing. Oh God.
Yeah.
I gotta admit, I'm stumped right now with that one. I mean, just give me a second here to.
Sure.
Okay, this may not quite be fun, but let me tell you this: we twice in my time, we got a bell, a ship's bell. You know, a ship has a bell they ring on to do things. You know, the big brass bell, and we got a bell and we hung it in the office. And every time a story was done, and we're using story and story points, so we had a number like this was a 3-point story. We would ring the bell 3 times. Bam, bam, bam. Bing, bing, you know, bell, bell, bell. And what I noticed after a while is that every time you heard the bell, it meant we got something done. And I would watch people and they'd be sitting working and they'd hear the bell and you could watch them getting more upright. Pride, they were going, we got something done. Great, isn't that great? We got something done. Okay. I don't know. The other one that was sort of fun is that the company put a big display up and they put the stock ticker up on the display hanging over the team. And all day long, the people are looking at the stock ticker and they said, this is not helping. This is not value adding, this display.
Okay.
So I warned management and they went out that one night and they got a ladder and they disconnected it. And so then they said, and so it's empty now. And I told but it's still there. They said, well, maybe we can use it. Maybe that could show us something we need. And so they did. They hooked up. Some of you know that build systems have a traffic light option. And the traffic light says a green, yellow means that a build is in progress, a red means the build failed, and a green means the build is good. And we put it up there, and we knew already from data, but it wasn't affecting us, that it was red 80% of the time. And we talked about it, nobody cared very much, but when that light was red, and people are like, what's that light doing? Because we got real traffic light, a real traffic light hung in the corner. And people, what's that red mean? It means our build broke. And so the team, and this is fun, I'll say this is fun. The team decided, what can we do? And so they said, the rule is now this. We all agree. The rule is if it's red, you can't go home.
Oh.
The team decided, if it's red, you can't go home.
Okay.
It went from 80% of the time being red to 20% of the time being red in 3 weeks. And that's all we did.
Okay, that's a funny one.
They weren't running their testing enough and all that, and they started doing all that. But I'll tell you one more story just to give you all, because I saw some questions here about things changing in time and all that. But I want to give you a little bit more about the scale of this. I just talked about builds. Before a build, if you're in software, if you're not, I'm sorry, but bear with me here, that you do a compilation. You type in something to the computer, and the computer has to turn it into something the computer understands. That's called a compilation. When I started in the business, a single run of the compiler took 24 hours. Okay? It took 24 hours because you had to pack it in on cards, and then at 5 o'clock, the guy came and got your cards, and he drove the 2.5 hours to the computer, and he ran it overnight and brought the results back to you that were on your desk the next morning. 24 hours. Compiles now run so fast you don't know they're happening. So that is the rate that things have changed in just my career. And so if we didn't have mechanisms that allowed us to deal with this rate of change, and Scrum does a very good job with that, we would have not been able to keep up. So just the last.
Thank you very much for sharing that last history, Jeff. And I really thank you very much for your time. I want to thank you actually for sharing all this information with us today. I'm pretty sure everybody in Latin America able to join join us today is very, very happy. And more than thank you for all your journey and all your experience. Thank you for always be open to share that with others. Let us all learn and grow more on this process of Agilism and Scrum. So thank you very much. I hope we can talk to you soon. I'm pretty sure we will talk soon. But thank you, Chef.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, and have a great rest of the conference. We'll hopefully see you sometime in the future.
I'm pretty sure we'll do that. Thank you, everybody, for joining today this conference and the Innovation Week. I hope you have a great week. Sorry.
All right. Great. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Nos encontramos en la era digital. Por eso le ofrecemos servicios y soluciones de tecnología para que transforme digitalmente su negocio. Grupo Babel, la empresa líder en transformación digital.